I want to ask all of you, what is going on in your spiritual lives? What's going on in your spiritual connection right now? Been doing this Gita thing for a while. I want to hear from you all. Just even something very simple. What's alive for you right now in your life, Marlena, in your spiritual practice?
I feel like this class has really been like my connection to my spiritual life. I don't have physical space here, temple or anything where I live. So this has been great. It's really kept me grounded, and I've been feeling um, just really called right now to uh, how do I want to say this? I don't know, like kind of get my shit together, and like step my game up a little bit in my spiritual life and in just my life in general. I feel like last year I was given a lot of gifts, and now it's up to me to really use them very responsibly and wisely, and to serve in my highest good. So that is going to
Mm,
require like a level up from me, and that's kind of where my head's been at. Just getting home from like 3 weeks away at the end of last week, like I'm kind of settling back into my house and ready to settle back into my routines, and really looking at what those are going to look like, to accomplish
yeah,
all of those things.
yeah. Looking looking to upgrade so
Yeah.
you can have your internal alignment match all the gifts that you've been given,
Yeah,
the
I feel
blessings you've been
like
given.
that's
Yeah.
that's kind of what happens, right? Like we upgrade, and then like Krishna gives us like rewards for that upgrade, right? And then it's up to us to show up again, and that's
Yeah.
kind of how we climb the ladder. And it's my turn. Like last year
Where, yeah.
I did my part. I took some chances and I said yes to a bunch of opportunities in life, and I really feel like I was really blessed last year. And now it's my turn again to do my part. So um yeah, that's where I'm at.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Hmm.
Isn't it
Thank you.
amazing? Isn't it amazing? Spiritual life is always asking more of us.
It's
Krishna's a greedy fellow,
it's
actually.
like a privilege, though. It doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a good thing to step into.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like that ungrateful child who has just been given so much, and I'm just still somehow arrogant and still entitled and all these other things. And I'm just like, wow, well, somehow Krishna still loves me, even in all my arrogance, even in all my whatever doo-doo I have in my heart, in my head. Somehow Krishna is still like, okay, I got you.
Yeah, no, I kind of feel like I've been taken advantage. I haven't really been doing my
Yeah.
part, so it's time.
I once heard one of my gurus say that your our job as spiritualists is to remain indebted. And I always loved that. Just like, and another one of my spiritual mentors, they said there is no way to pay it back. You can just pay it forward. You can't pay it back.
No,
How can
no,
you
for
pay
sure.
back something that's priceless?
Yeah.
You can only try your best to pay it forward. And that happens through the exact process that you're talking about of upgrading the responsibility and the Dharma side of things. And I've been feeling that too. Just like I'm given more opportunity to enjoy this material world. And then with that, I have to like tighten up the bolts of like, okay, what is my integrity? What is my mission here? Am I getting sidetracked? Where's my heart at? How do I want to serve? How do I want to represent my guru and my spiritual tradition, my teachers? Or else I'm just enamored by whatever is outside of me. So appreciate that. Thank you, Marlena. Anybody else want to just share something brief, a little nugget of your heart that we can take with us? Divya, I see you glancing. So why don't you go next?
No, thank you so much for asking, Yamuna. One thing that I'm carrying this week is a dilemma, actually. And I've been coming across a lot of literature on like manifestation and law of attraction and all that stuff. And so I feel, and I grew up with, philosophies and traditions where it's more like, God and your guru on the path to God, like have so much more information about what is good for you, and what you need in life, and your responsibility sort of to like stay open to receiving their wisdom. And so when I read about manifestation, I think I feel confused in terms of like, this idea of like, oh, I am a creator, I can create my destiny and my world and my life with my thoughts, that versus
Yeah.
like surrendering to a loving wise power that's greater than me. I feel caught between these two philosophies.
Yeah. Um, they're both true. One is that we are small Narayans, right? We are small little versions of God who have the same qualities of God, but we just lack in quantity, right? So just as you can take a drop of water from the ocean and you can say, yes, I have the ocean. Not quite. It has all the same qualities, but it's different in quantity. And so in the same sense, Bhagavan means one who has all different of the opulences in their fullness. So all beauty, all strength, all knowledge, all renunciation, et cetera, et cetera. And we can only say, I have a little bit. And if we're to the extent that we have more of each of those opulences, we become godlike and we become idolized because of that, because we're all looking for Bhagavan. So those who have more beauty, more fame, more power, more renunciation, etc., more strength, they attract us just as God does, because Krishna says in the 10th chapter, all these different varieties are just a spark of my splendor. The mountains, the cosmos, the human being, the minute cell with its trillions of functions. When I was becoming a biologist, that was one of the things that really helps me get more faith in God, because I was just like, this is so incredibly complex and we hardly even understand it. And so it was just mind blowing to me. I was like, this is so cool. And Krishna says, it's just a spark of my splendor. Like when you have a big fire and there's just a little spark that goes to the side, this whole cosmic manifestation is just a spark, just one of those tiny little things, not even the fire of Krishna's splendor. And we have that within our heart too. We are we are small little versions of God. And so we have some ability to manifest, but God has all ability to manifest. That's the difference. I can't just go like this and all of creation is created, right? That is what Siddha is. That is what yoga siddhis are. There's mystic perfections of yoga that allow you to manipulate the matter around you. And what we call technology is actually trying to mimic yogic perfection. So, for instance, one of the yoga siddhis is to think of something from a distant place, right? A yogi will be able to think of medjool dates from Persia, from the middle of Iran, and be able to think of them, and then in his mind be able to take those dates and eat those dates. That is one of the yogic perfections, one of the mystic perfections. What do we have? Amazon Prime. So I can think of anything and almost instantly have it delivered to my door, right? And we can take very big things, right? Mahima, and make them lagima, make them very small, right? What is this? It's a whole universe in a small little object, and I've made it small and I've made it lightweight. Things that you could have pictures of mountains. You have so many things on here and they're light. So you can see something from a distant place clearly. There's all these different cities. And we're, as we advance with technology, trying to grasp at those cities because we're ultimately trying to become God. But we can't. And so we're frustrated because we don't have all control. And so for me, myself, how I've dealt with that tension that you're speaking of is, you know what? I do have my own karmas and my own divine mystic arrangements and destiny and scope for manifestation in my life. And I'm also completely at the will of God. And so the only way to be satisfied is to be satisfied in my consciousness and be satisfied with very little or nothing. And then if good things come, oh yeah, this is my fruits of my karma. And if bad things come, oh yes, actually, I should get worse. All the bad things I've done. And so the yogi just deals with this karma as like good and bad fruits that you're picking from a tree. Oh, sometimes a little sour bite, sometimes a little sweet bite. Okay, what's to be done? So for me, it's just kind of like this prayerful thing of like preference, but also wanting to make sure that my preference is not superseding what Krishna wants for me. And so it's been this interesting thing because I'm a person who likes to grow and likes big challenges and likes more and likes bigger visions and do big stuff. And I've been confronted by that on my spiritual path many times because bigger and bigger opportunities keep presenting themselves to me. And I've always found like, okay, if opportunity is presenting itself in my path and I'm not trying to strain so hard to change destiny, then why don't I try to do it in the right consciousness? If beautiful opportunities come, new knowledge comes, new ways to be better. And then really that's what this whole section is about in the end of chapter 4 is about karma yoga and is really about how to make work samadhi, how to make your work a process of samadhi where you're in complete communion and every one of your actions is in action, as we covered in our last class, right? Who sees inaction in action in action in inaction. And that's the job of the devotee or of the yogi is to ultimately offer all of the objects of the senses to the fire of the mind to be satisfied. It's not about the objects. It's about my consciousness. And so we're going to read all about that today. How to reconcile and what the different types of karmas are according to our gunas, according to the qualities with which we're born, according to the modes of nature that are pulling us. For me to just sit in a cave and meditate and renounce the world, it will be impossible for me. It's not my nature. I can only do what I was made to do. And if Krishna wants to make that something extravagant, awesome. And if Krishna wants to pulverize me to the ground, so I'm so humble, it will be painful. But ultimately, if I trust that that's Krishna's loving hand, it will be the best. As long as I trust Krishna always has my best interest in mind, I can be peaceful, which is what a loving relationship is. And I'm always going to be provided for. There's not, like St. Francis says, he said, do you see any birds or trees that are for want? No, every day they're provided for. Every day they go and they search, and they're in a more desperate position than us because they don't know. They don't know. And every day they're provided for. Every creature has enough on this planet. So when we trust that, the basic ingredients for satisfaction are always here, and for sustenance are always here. What to speak of the society we live in now of overflow? We can rest in that. And we can kind of have this detachedness and go for big things while also just knowing I'm good and Krishna's got me no matter what. That's just how I've dealt with it. It's not how I'm saying you should deal with it. You could do it. But was that helpful at all? Or
It really was. Thank you.
yeah, did you have anything to add there? Or
No, this is so helpful, Yamuna, because I think yeah, I guess it's like also the question of, um, like I've heard, every single thing is predetermined. Like all these quotes of like, oh, not even a blade of grass moves without the will of God. And then on the other hand, there's like like everything is just like a field of infinite possibilities,
yeah,
and so I'm like,
well,
what do I do?
it's both.
Mm,
Again, every spiritual truth is like a paradox. For something to be complete, it means it has to have both the thesis and the antithesis, and the synthesis is when the rishis cognize reality for all the incongruencies that it has and all the seeming contradictions that work together in an ultimately absolute reality. So for someone to say everything's happening by chance, it's a pretty weak argument, because every word that comes out of my mouth exponentially decreases the chance that things are happening by chance, right? Everything that happens that makes sense and is linear exponentially decreases the chance that things are happening by chance. So it's a very poor line of thought that everything is by chance, right? And then also the other side, everything's predetermined, right? And I slap you. So you determine that, right? Did you determine that? Did you predetermine that? They say yes. Well, that was predetermined, and I've dealt with all these very tricky kind of philosophical people who are, atheistic, and they just want to prove some sort of point. And they're like, well, the fact that I said this predisposed you to wanting to reply to me like this, and blah 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 is all said. I'm like, okay, it's also weak, right? It's also weak. So it's both. It's both. There's a field of possibility within a realm of determined path, right? You are in one sense dealt the cards of destiny, but you decide how to play them. You always have the choice of how to play the cards of destiny. So within that, there's always choice. But sometimes you're dealt a card. That's a card. I don't
wow,
know if
thank
that
you. That's so
I don't know if that
helpful.
makes sense.
No, it's so helpful. I feel like a weight lifting off of me.
Yeah, it gets too trippy, right? Like the deeper you try to think about stuff like that, it
Yeah.
just it leads
It's almost
nowhere,
like
and it just
paralyzing
makes it
where
makes
I'm just,
it makes the brain just explode when you just are like, oh my God, like everything's predetermined. And then you're like, even that thought, and then you're like, oh my God, even that thought. And it
yeah,
just is paralyzing almost. And then
yeah,
if everything is chance, then it's all meaningless. It's all arbitrary, and therefore you could do anything and nothing means anything.
yeah.
But we see that there are patterns, and there are laws, and there are rules, and within every culture, even cultures completely geographically isolated from one another, throughout all time, those cultures have come to many of the same conclusions about reality, because there's sattva, and sattva means the cognition of reality or truth as it is. And there's always going to be someone with sattva in a culture. Therefore, they're always going to cognize truth
Mm.
in a particular culture, because truth isn't just something written in a book. It's absolute, and it's always available. But it's is determined by our clarity to perceive it. And there's always going to be people more clear and less clear. And so there's always going to be the same difficulties in every culture. There's always going to be the same truths in every culture, pretty much. And so the fact that that's happened is another argument. Anyways, we could probably establish tons of different arguments for it. I just say the most truthful thing I can say is I like it. I like these ideas and they serve me well. And that is true for me. That's what I can say for certainty. I can't say for sure Krishna's God, because I don't know. I can say I like it. I like the idea. It's better than any other idea I've heard. And it's an idea that I like enough to dedicate my life to it. And the people who I know who have fully exercised believing that idea and living that idea, I like them and I like their character and I admire them. And so it was just about cause and effect and about a little bit of scientific process. And that's what I can say is true, is I like it. Not a big revelation for this class, but it's important that we don't become dogmatic, even though I can have the conviction that my path and this knowledge is the deepest. I can't say, because until I've cognized it directly and Krishna standing in front of me and I'm understanding what's in the book right in front of me in 100% truth, what can I say? I can say I like it. Was that helpful at all, Divya?
Definitely, yes. Thank you.
Cool. Andrea or Lisa, did you have anything you wanted to share? Any check-in around? Maybe you're holding back and you want to say something? Okay. Complete, Purnam? Awesome. Should we jump into the rest of this chapter? Cool. Let's take a deep breath. Let it go. Thank you all for that. I appreciate that. It's good to hear you all speak. So we left off on chapter 4, verse 21. So we'll pick it up from there. Such a man of understanding acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, gives up all sense of proprietorship over his possessions, and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Thus working, he is not affected by karmas or sinful reactions. He who is satisfied with gain which comes of its own accord, who is free from duality and does not envy, who is steady in both success and failure, is never entangled, although performing actions. So again, some of the same theme we were just discussing, right? The work of a man or woman who is unattached to the modes of material nature and who is fully situated in transcendental knowledge merges entirely into transcendence. Okay. Yeah. Free from duality and does not envy. It's so easy to envy, especially in the social media universe that we live in. Look at other people and judge. And it's generally not people who are doing something radically different than us, but people who are pursuing something quite similar to us, and it just looks like they're doing it better, right? And we're like, damn, look at them, like more followers, or they're making more money, or they're doing it better, or they're more trained, or they're more opportunities, whatever it is. But it's interesting because even if we experience that envy for those people who are similar to us, but maybe further along, when we finally do become as great, then we become the person we once hated and we attract the similar envy to us. Right? So if you're hating on someone further ahead, really you're saying that should be me. That should be mine. That belongs to me. And then you get it and you become that person that you once were envious of and once were throwing hatred towards. And then you become the object of that. You attract that similar envy. So that's the just kind of duality. And so that's why Krishna is recommending to be equal to success and failure. And that means to be devoid of jubilation at what comes of its own accord, and devoid of lamentation when nothing comes. Well, pretty hard to do. I'm attached. I want and I don't want, and I try to avoid. And and that's my whole life, trying to chase pleasure and trying to avoid pain. But Krishna's saying, hey, there's something beyond that. And that's where you can actually be free. Imagine, I just imagine some of these realities sometimes. Imagine what it would be like to never be truly moved by any success or any failure. Imagine what it would be like to have your own internal contentment be affected by zero external factors ever. Even the greatest calamity and heartbreak. Imagine how liberating that would be, how empowering that would be. And the devotee, the yogi, is not meant to be a hard-hearted person. They're actually meant to be most sensitive person to other people's needs and to where other people are at. But for themselves, they're good in themselves, content in themselves, and nothing is moving them. Okay. Yeah, pretty high standard for sure. Okay, 24. A person who is fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness is sure to attain the spiritual kingdom because of his full contribution to spiritual activities, in which the consummation is absolute and that which is offered is of the same spiritual nature. Okay, so really what this means is one whose actions take on the form of jnana yoga. So when one is really absorbed in devotion and one is absorbed in karma yoga proper, then all of the activities become samadhi. They become the same spiritual nature. There's no difference between your activities and the consciousness. It is one thing, and it is all devoted for one purpose that is beyond the attachment and aversion of your own personhood. Does that make sense? This nishkama karma yoga, which means to act in this world with remembrance of divinity, that's karma yoga. Nishkama means without the selfish material desire. So when one can move through this world without selfish desire and while remembering the absolute, one's one's activities is of the same spiritual nature because one's consciousness is fully absorbed. Does that make sense? Okay, I get 2 nods. I'm looking up to the right. Get some blank stares. That's pretty good. All right, that's pretty good. We'll move on. Anything not making sense? It's basically saying like when you're absorbed in divinity, your work becomes jnana yoga. And you become qualified to commune with Krishna directly. What a beautiful thing. 25. Some yogis perfectly worship the demigods by offering different sacrifices to them, and some offer sacrifices in the fire of the supreme Brahman. Okay. So all different methods of yogis that are about to be spoken about. The next pretty much 8 verses. So Krishna is going to describe the different types of karma yoga and the different types of karma yogis, right? Some who worship the devatas, Lord Shiva, Lord Ganesh, Parvati, Saraswati, okay? Other the jnana yogis, they offer their self into the fire of Brahman, into the fire of oneness, into the fire of that all-pervasive godhood that is Brahman. And others, they offer themselves into the syllable Om and experience Paramatma, experience God in the heart. The yogis, some yogis. So Krishna is going to go through a bunch of different types of karma yogis right now. Okay, so let's see what he says. Some, the unadulterated brahmacharis, sacrifice the hearing process and the senses in the fire of mental control. And others, the regulated householders, sacrifice the objects of the senses in the fire of the senses. Okay, so the unadulterated brahmachari, it's the term in Sanskrit is Naishtaki brahmachari. It means someone who has not even lost a drop of semen in their whole life. So they have never done. They offer the senses, like the ear, into the fire of the controlled mind, which means that their senses are no longer functioning externally, but they're absorbed in trance. Okay, so they're situated in trance and their senses are no longer material senses. So it's a little hard to understand when we are operating from a very material body standpoint. The other less controlled brahmacharis, aka those who are married, right? They're less controlled monks. Those married people, they offer the sense objects, right? Those objects outside of yourself that you enjoy into the fire of the senses, meaning the senses and the objects contact one another, but they remain detached. You remain detached from the ups and downs of contact with those objects. Okay. Does that make sense? Right. So they're experiencing things, but they're not experiencing things in relation to attachment and aversion and being swayed by the objects outside of them. They're not being pulled by the senses as we are. Okay. So they see something and you get dragged, right? Like it happens to me sometimes where I'm like, oh yeah, like I literally had to send a message to you guys today. And I was like, yeah, let me just pull up WhatsApp and go to the Gita. And I was like, oh, who's this messaging me? And I was like, okay, like what they messaged me about. Oh, so good, like sending me memes and whatever. And I'm like immediately captured. And then I'm like, oh, let me check my Instagram. And then I check my Instagram. I'm like, oh, look at this. My wife sent me an Australian Shepherd video, a reel. I gotta check it out. Okay, there's some cute music. And then I just like put my phone down and I was like, I feel like I was supposed to do something. I feel like I was supposed to do something. And I'm like, damn. Okay, yeah, Bhagavad Gita. That's embarrassing. Okay. Look at my uncontrolled senses just dragging me here and there. And so this does not happen for the unadulterated brahmachari, the Naishtiki brahmachari, or really the transcendentalist who's situated in householder or married life. So it's very interesting. In one sense, here's how I think about it. The yogi who is living in householder life has to be in one way more advanced, right? Because as a teenager, it was very easy to say, yes, let me become a monk. And then I'm so proud. Look at, I've given up the world. What did I give up? I have $200 in my bank. I don't have a job. I am not married. I don't have any career started. What did I give up? I did not give up anything. I just change clothes, shave my head, and now look how renounced, right? Whereas one who has the opportunity to steal and not get caught and who chooses not to, then you can call yourself truthful. When one has an opportunity to cheat on their wife or their husband and they know they will never get caught and they choose not to, then you can call yourself faithful. Right? To the extent you can exercise or flex the opposite of what your integrity stands for and not get caught and still choose not to, that is to the extent you're in integrity. So sometimes there's this artificial renunciation when I first got into my spiritual life of now I'm in my own little Hare Krishna bubble. I'm living in the monastery. I'm so renounced. Look, whatever. And then as soon as I get out of the monastery, it's like, okay, all the sense gratification is there. Everything's on display. And now it's the test of my monkhood. Now it's the test. And it always was, because I was living in New York City and there's always crazy stuff happening. There's always people flaunting their bodies, and everything you could imagine is available at your fingertips. And so it was the most challenging place than just to live in the forest as a monk. Like, oh, how peaceful, whatever, how wonderful. But to be in the middle of the worst place, the most materialistic place on the planet, and to try to be a monk, that helped me a lot in many ways, and was also annoying. So yeah, this, in one sense, the householder or those in the married life, they are given the license to enjoy one of the most intoxicating joys, which is that of the opposite sex. And one has to do that in a way that elevates one consciousness, because it can easily just capture you and pull you into a sensual oriented existence where everything's about your own pleasure, where everything's about getting more and tasting more and smelling more and seeing more and feeling more and whatever. And it just starts to subtly erode your spiritual values if you don't focus it. And so Krishna is saying here, that is the sacrifice, is that they have the things, but they're not controlled by the things, right? They have the objects of the senses, right? And here's a good one that I heard is, we objectify others because we objectify ourselves, which is kind of hard to reconcile. But we objectify others, meaning we see others in accordance to our pain and pleasure, to the extent that we objectify our own bodies and minds as simply things to be used by us and to be enjoyed by us, right? So if you see yourself as the body and as the mind, you are objectifying yourself, like by definition. You are making yourself an object. And to the extent that you do that, you make yourself simply an object, right? I'm a meat vessel with eyes and nose and ears and mouth, whatever. To the extent that I do that, I objectify others. And so some people just, oh, don't objectify others. I'm like, impossible unless you transcend. Because you see yourself as an object to be enjoyed. So you can't just mentally rearrange. Like, that's what I don't like about woke culture when I was living as a monk, was that it was so much about just changing how you speak and changing what appeared to be proper and not proper, instead of actually changing the consciousness. How am I going to not objectify people if I objectify myself? Impossible. I can speak better, use all the right words and show how woke I am, or I can change my consciousness, which is only possible through processes of transcendence, because that's the only way you can get out of I, me, and mine consciousness, is through transcendence, or otherwise it is impossible. You will live from the false ego. There's no way out of it. Does that make sense? It's kind of like sad. I'm like, damn, okay. First of all, I create all my own problems. Okay. Second of all, I objectify myself. Therefore, I objectify others. I'm like, not cute. Okay. Strike number 2. And I'm just like going down the list. I'm like, ooh. All my karmas are from my previous activities. I'm like, wonderful. Just like all the confronting truths. I would rather just mimic the woke speak and not have to change myself, because that's much harder. That actually asks something of me, and I'm not willing to do that. Okay, verse 27. Others who are interested in achieving self-realization through control of the mind and senses offer the functions of all the senses and of the life breath as oblations into the fire of the controlled mind. So this is talking about prana and yoga and the controlled mind, Atma, is the fire. Okay, so our tendency is that the ear tries to grasp sound. The tendency of the tongue is to try to grasp taste, right? The tendency of the nose is to grasp smells. And so through the mind, they destroy the grasping process through yoga. And they understand that the movement of the pranas help them regulate manomaya kosha, the mind. They believe that only the soul perceiving itself exists and not anything else. So that is this yogi. Okay, so we're going through different types of yogis and how they approach karma yoga. Does this make sense? How they approach sacrifice, how they approach this concept of yagya, of giving up something to get something better, to attain the supreme in this case. Is this making sense? They give up the process of grasping of the senses towards the objects by regulating the prana, and thereby regulating the manomaya kosha and offering it into the controlled self, so that the soul is simply perceiving itself. Now, you know, as the Yoga Sutras say, yoga chitta vritti narodha, all the fluctuations of the mind, that's what yoga is for, to destroy. That's what yoga is meant to destroy. Yoga chitta vritti narodha. All the chitta vrittis, all the fluctuations in your mind, they are nirodha. They are destroyed by yoga process. And then one can experience the soul perceiving itself. And how beautiful, because that is just a spark of Krishna's splendor. And even that spark is so, you'll cry and cry. You'll experience, you'll cry and cry. 28, having accepted strict vows, some become enlightened by sacrificing their possessions, and others perform severe austerities by practicing the yoga of eightfold mysticism, or by studying the Vedas to advance in transcendental knowledge. Okay, so this is talking about the vows of charity, right? Sacrificing their possessions, the vows of austerity, of doing very hard things, of Ashtanga yoga is a very hard process. And I went to my Ashtanga Vinyas class. You see what real yogi looks like, you'll be mortified. You're not posted on Instagram. They're not wearing yoga pants. They don't got a big booty. They're not looking how we think. It is a very austere life. One of the things you can watch to see how these different Babajis live. Has anyone seen Babajis being in India, living in? Okay, yeah, so Divya. Okay, so you see all sorts of Babajis, and especially those who are going towards the austerity path can be so cruel to their own body. And there's a documentary on YouTube that was made in the 70s or 80s. I'll put it in the chat. Kings on Straw Mats. Has anybody ever watched Kings on Straw Mats? Oh, it's really good. I watch it many times, but I haven't watched it in at least a few years. But basically, it's a documentary filmmaker who goes to the Kumbh Mela, which is the largest gathering of sadhus or saints in the world, where millions and millions of saints converge into Prayag, which is the Triveni of the three most important rivers in India. And so it happens every year, but then every few years or every 4 years, 10 years, there's a Maha Kumbh Mela, which means a huge one. So every year there's a small version, but then every so often there's a huge one. And that's when all the saints from India, Nepal, etc., all come to this one place, and millions of people are bathing there. And so he's walking through the Kumbh Mela in the 80s with a camera. And so you'll see, of course, so much has changed since then, but you'll see yogis who their austerity is to just hold their arm up their whole life. and it gets locked into place. So after a while, there's nothing they can do. They hold their arm up, and it gets locked into place forever. Others who only use one leg, right? They put one leg into like a asan, like in their pelvic area, like a half lotus kind of pose, and put one leg up into half lotus, and the other they stand on, and they never sit their whole life. They stand on one leg their whole life, and they sleep leaning against a tree with the rope, standing. And so they negate the physical so that they can experience the spiritual. But this is ultimately called austerity in the mode of darkness. This is when austerity is painful for everyone, right? It is self-torture. And so it's generally practiced by those who worship particular devatas that are administrators of tamaguna, like Lord Shiva, like Durga, Kali. So this is what this is talking about. We think, oh yes, and go to my Ashtanga Vinyas. This is what they're talking about. People who give up eating, people who give up sleep, people who give up drinking even water and live through prana, live just by drinking prana. Actually, all five of the elements are present in prana. All five elements are present in the air. And so they understand how to extract all five elements through breathing. This is Hanuman. It is controlling the five vayus. And they understand how to manipulate the five vayus and understand the five elements outside of themselves so that they can self-sustain on the only nutrient that exists, which is prana. The only nutrient that exists in the whole universe is prana. And so they understand that science. So do not try this at home. Do not tell, this is what I learned in Yamuna's class today, to stand on one leg and drink the five elements through a straw. No. I'll get fired by Krishna. Krishna will fire me if you do that. You're fired. Okay, let's read one or two more. Still others who are inclined to the process of breath restraint to remain in trance practice by offering the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming and the incoming breath into the outgoing, and thus at last remain in trance, stopping all breathing. Others, curtailing the eating process, offer the outgoing breath into itself as sacrifice. Yeah. So they understand upward prana and the downward apana vayu. And when they fully inhale, they merge those two pranas. And at the time of exhale, they offer the apana vayu into prana. And in the time of kumbhaka, they stop the movement of all prana and they become completely absorbed in what is really called pranayama, the control of, right, the yamas, yama to restrict prana. So then they become situated properly in what pranayama is, which is a samadhi process, offering all the pranas, the downward and upward pranas into each other, the exhale into the inhale, therefore just remaining merged without the need to breathe. Pretty advanced. Others eat very little and subsist mainly off of prana. And they're incapable of grasping sense objects because they are merged with their own pranas. So they're basically consciousness experiencing itself while the human body just sits, does what it does. But they're incapable of grasping objects outside of oneself. Sounds scary to me. But it's not going to be scary if you're there because all you will experience is your own prana and your own soul. So Okay, last verses. All these performers who know the meaning of sacrifice become cleansed of sinful reactions, and having tasted the nectar of the results of sacrifices, they advance towards the supreme eternal atmosphere. So this verse 30, 31, 32, it's all what happens if you do these yagya, or and what happens if you do not do these yagya. Oh, best of the Kuru dynasty, without sacrifice, one can never live happily on this planet or in this life. What then of the next? All these different types of sacrifice are approved by the Vedas, and all of them are born of different types of work. Knowing them as such, you will become liberated. I just thought that that was a great takeaway point is without sacrifice, one cannot be happy. Which is sort of counterintuitive because we think comfort will bring happiness. But that is what drives so many who have achieved all the accoutrements of comfort to kill themselves. They become famous, they become wealthy, become this kind of, and they realize what they're chasing is still not available. And then it becomes depressing. Whereas the yogis, they do the other way around. Yeah, there's all this. This is all low grade enjoyment, enjoyment of the senses. If you really want to enjoy, and that's what you want to make your life about is bliss and enjoyment, there's a higher grade of joy available through yoga. There's a higher grade of joy still in Brahman. There's a higher grade of joy still in Paramatma. There's the highest grade of joy in Bhagavan or in seeing Krishna himself. And so there's this very strange concept of perfect, more perfect, and most perfect in the Vedas. That something can be perfect and complete, and something can be more complete. And you think, how can it be more complete? But sometimes, just like when you're in school and you get a good grade, right? Sometimes, how do you get 110 on a test? It is more complete. How do you have a 4.5 GPA? It is most complete, right? So there's complete, there's more complete, and there's most complete. And there's the same within spiritual perfection. There's spiritual perfection, there's spiritually even more perfect, and there's spiritually most perfect. And that is Bhagavan Paramatma and Bhagavan realizations. Because each increasing grade of perfection comes with it more facility to enjoy relating in supreme bliss as a person in your own personhood, in who you actually are. Anyways, I don't want to get into a whole thing that we did last week and the week before. The whole slice of love that's only yours. But that's ultimately what Bhakti Path is for. And I can speak about it like I know, but I can only imagine. And I've only had, I don't even know if I can appropriately call it tastes, but just maybe even a glimpse of a glimpse of a glimpse. And that glimpse is beautiful, is more beautiful than anything. And all of us have had some glimpse, or else we wouldn't be here every week. Some sort of genuine pull of God's hand, or else we wouldn't be here. And so, again, it's about opting in. Do I opt in? And opt in again, and opt in again. And to the extent I'm attached to things outside of myself, I will not be able to grab onto Krishna's hand that is right there also. If I'm too busy strapping myself to this material world. So while Krishna consciousness or bhakti is not about detachment, it is about attachment, but attachment to the right thing, and more particularly the right person, Krishna, and his divine consort, Sri Radha. So one of my teachers, he says, bhakti is not renunciation, it is dedication. So you don't have to give anything up. You just have to add Krishna. And the more you add Krishna, the more you naturally will not want to do any of the nonsense. And to the extent that there's nonsense, you know that you're not focused on Krishna. Okay. Any comments, questions, corrections? Can we stare at each other for a while? Okay, good. We'll do that. What's one point you appreciated where that hit you? Andrea, go ahead. You can't unmute, you're stuck. Please hold. You just have to click the unmute button and you click your phone and then. Okay, we'll come back to you. We'll let you figure it out. Okay, Divya, did you have one thing, any point that stood out to you?
I think when you were talking about like the sort of consciousness that envy traps us in, where like when we're envious of other people and then eventually if we get where they are, we've actually recreated like the same circumstances in which other people are directing that consciousness towards us. That was really powerful to hear.
I'm glad I wasn't depressing.
It was also
It's
depressing, but
powerful. It's powerful when we also when it's powerful for me when I increase my integrity to then meet the facility that destiny is presenting me. And it's a fun challenge for me the more, whatever it is, income I have, or the more people are appreciating me or speaking nice things about me, than to increase my own existence, my own standards of operating, my own responsibility to myself and to others, and to have that reflected in how I live. Because there are many in the Vedic stories who had tremendous wealth, who had tremendous fame, who had tremendous strength, who were the best at whatever they were doing. And Krishna didn't tell Arjuna, don't be the best. He said, do your best. Do your duty fully. It's better to do your duty fully than to try to do someone else's. But most of us are scared of our own personhood. And so we hide behind mimicking others. And that's also tragic. It's tragic to deflate yourself as a human, and it's tragic to inflate yourself. And so better just be humble, which means to be honest. And when I'm honest, I realize I've been given everything, the ability to speak, the knowledge I have, the money I have, the roof over my head. I've been given my own body from my parents and from the elements and from the foods and from the farmers and from the sun, from God. And so if I've been given everything, what do I have to be proud of? If nothing is mine and I've been given everything, it just is what it is. And so better to use whatever maybe talent I have for speaking or for helping others or for teaching or for influencing or whatever, and just be honest. Yes, this is a strength of mine and Krishna's given it. And now I'll use it in service instead of downplay. Oh no. You know, the fake humility that, you had. No. Because if you're rejecting, it's just as arrogant as if you're accepting. because you're saying, no, Krishna's not great. Krishna did it. Krishna gave it to you. Krishna gave you the qualities. It's just as arrogant to say, no, it's not great, as it is to say, yes, I am, as to take full credit yourself. Yes, I am so great. They're both arrogant. So better be honest. Yeah. So it's depressing, but it's also empowering in the right light. Krishna's not saying abandon your destiny. He's saying do your destiny fully. And by being in the right consciousness, you can transcend. No matter what, your destiny will play out. Why try to make it a sad, small one? No matter what, you're going to get what you need. Why make it smaller and sadder and self-deprecating? It's not serving anyone. Anybody else have one point you like? Marlena, Lisa?
I really liked when you said that when you're absorbed, I think you said when you're absorbed in Krishna consciousness, your work becomes jnana yoga.
Yeah. That's the goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that I have a little sticky note above my computer and it says, I want you to guide me in everything at all times. I want to see you everywhere. Because Krishna is everything. There's no such thing as turning away from God because God's in every direction. You can't turn it. You try to turn. No, still God. You try to avoid. No, still God. The only way that we can actually turn away is in consciousness, in our hearts. In our hearts, we can turn away from God. But factually, it's everywhere. So if we just practice becoming a little cognizant of that throughout the day, we are working towards that karma yoga consciousness. And then everything I do, even in my business, I say, Krishna, send me the people who I'm meant to serve. And the right people come in. Make a sale. Krishna, I offer this to you. Right? Do something great. Thank you, Krishna. You brought it in. Something tragic. Thank you, Krishna. It sucks. But I'm going to get through it with your help. And so every direction you look, there Krishna is. And we have the opportunity. It's easiest to forget for myself, it's easiest to forget in the best moments because you're high from existence. So if we say steady in distress, I'm solid. When I'm suffering, I'm solid.
Yeah.
I'm remembering God. I'm being dope as heck. I'm being spiritual. I'm suffering. I'm being solid right now. God, look at me. Help me out. Okay. And I find it more of a challenge when I'm thriving and I'm hitting new heights and I'm just killing it, to just be like, Krishna, you've literally given me everything and let me not be intoxicated by this. It is more of a practice for me, at least. Okay. Any last thing you guys got for me? Awesome. So we talked about karma, the different types of yagya, different types of sacrifice, what that looks like according to different paths of yoga and different yogis and how they approach it, and what the results of either doing yagya or not doing yagya are. That's what we covered today. Do yagya, get benefit. Don't do yagya, suffer in this life and the next. So sacrifice is necessary, and it's Viktor Frankl even says that in his book Man's Search for Meaning. He says without Without a man is willing to carry a massive weight, he just needs something to carry it for. He needs a reason. But he's ready to carry a massive burden on his back, but he just needs a reason to do it for. And we all need that, all of us. We need a burden worth carrying. Okay, have a beautiful evening. Thank you so much for tolerating me once again. I can't believe it. And I'll see you all next week. Hariyam Tat Sat. Thank you all so much.